The bullet had gone clean through her shoulder 3 years ago, but Delilah Dawson still felt the ghost of it every time storm clouds gathered over the Nevada desert. She stood at the window of the Sloan Saloon where she worked, watching dust devils dance across the parched earth in the late afternoon heat of 1878. Her left arm aching with phantom pain that no doctor could cure. The scar was just one of many that marked her body and soul, remnants of a marriage that had nearly killed her before her husband finished the job himself, bleeding out in a Las Vegas jail cell after the law finally caught up with his crimes. "You daydreaming again, Delilah?" Martha, the saloon owner, asked from behind the bar. The older woman's voice carried no judgment, only the weary understanding of someone who had seen too many broken women pass through her doors. "Just watching the weather," Delilah replied, turning away from the window. At 24, she felt decades older, her dark hair always pulled back in a severe bun, her dresses buttoned to the collar despite the desert heat. She had learned to make herself small, invisible, untouchable. "That cattle outfit from Wyoming is supposed to arrive today," Martha said, wiping down the bar with practiced efficiency. "The one moving south for the winter. They will want rooms and hot food. Maybe you could serve them without looking like you were headed to a funeral." Delilah managed a tight smile. "I will do my job, Martha. I always do." "I know, honey. I just wish you would let yourself live a little. You are too young to be so closed off from the world." But Delilah had heard this before, from Martha, from the few townspeople who bothered to speak to her, from the circuit preacher who came through Sloan once a month. They meant well, but they did not understand. Her late husband, Thomas, had made sure she understood her worth, his fists and words combining to break something fundamental inside her. Even now, 2 years after his death, she heard his voice in her darkest moments. "You are nothing. Damaged goods. No real man would ever want you." The sound of horses and cattle reached them before the dust cloud appeared on the horizon. Delilah busied herself with preparing the dining room, setting out plates and utensils with mechanical precision. She had learned to disappear into routine, to let her mind go blank while her hands worked. It was safer that way. The cowboys came in waves as the sun began its descent toward the distant mountains. They were loud, tired, and covered in trail dust, their voices filling the small saloon with stories of the drive south from Wyoming territory. Delilah moved among them like a ghost, taking orders and delivering food without meeting anyone's eyes. She had perfected this dance over the years, the art of being present without being seen. "Madam, could I trouble you for some more coffee?" The voice was different from the others, quieter, with a gentleness that made Delilah's shoulders tense instinctively. She turned to find a man watching her with steady gray eyes that held none of the aggressive appraisal she had learned to expect. He was younger than most of the other cowboys, perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-weathered skin and dark blonde hair that curled at his collar. There was something careful in the way he held himself, as if he understood the concept of taking up only the space he needed. "Of course," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She fetched the pot and refilled his cup, her hand trembling slightly as she poured. She hated that she still shook around men, hated the weakness it revealed. "Thank you," he said, and she noticed he waited until she had stepped back before reaching for the cup. Such a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. Most men grabbed without thinking, their hands sometimes brushing hers, their proximity a constant threat. "Gabriel, quit mooning and get over here," one of the other cowboys called out. "Boss wants to discuss tomorrow's plan." The gray-eyed man, Gabriel apparently, stood with fluid grace and tipped his hat to Delilah before joining his companions. She retreated to the kitchen, her heart hammering in her chest for reasons she could not quite name. It had been a simple exchange, meaningless really, but something about the way he had looked at her, as if she were a person rather than an object, had shaken the careful walls she had built. The evening wore on, and Delilah continued her work with mechanical efficiency. The Wyoming cowboys eventually settled into their rooms upstairs, and the saloon quieted to its usual evening hum of local patrons nursing drinks and playing cards. She was wiping down tables when Martha approached her with a concerned expression. "Delilah, honey, there is a gentleman asking to speak with you. Says his name is Gabriel Ironwood, and he is with that cattle outfit. I can tell him you are busy if you want." Delilah's first instinct was to refuse, to hide in the kitchen until he gave up and left. But Martha was watching her with such hope in her eyes, the same hope that appeared whenever anyone showed Delilah the slightest bit of positive attention. She knew Martha wanted better for her, wanted her to heal, to trust again. It was an impossible dream, but Delilah found herself nodding despite her better judgment. Gabriel stood near the bar, his hat in his hands, still covered in trail dust. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the result of years squinting into the sun and wind. He was not classically handsome, his features too rough for that, but there was something solid about him, something steady. "Madam, I hope I'm not being too forward," he began, his voice carrying that same careful gentleness. "I wanted to apologize if I made you uncomfortable earlier. I noticed you seemed uneasy, and I realized I should have asked one of the other fellows to flag you down instead of calling out myself." Delilah stared at him, genuinely confused. In her experience, men did not apologize for taking up space or demanding attention. They certainly did not notice when women were uncomfortable, or care if they did notice. You did nothing wrong," she managed, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "All the same, I wanted to make sure. My mother raised me to be mindful of others, and I would hate to think I had caused you any distress." He smiled then, a small, genuine expression that did not reach for anything beyond what it was. "I will let you get back to your work. Thank you again for the coffee and the fine meal." He turned to leave, and Delilah found herself speaking before she could stop herself. "Why?" Gabriel paused, looking back at her with questioning eyes. "Why what, madam? Why would you apologize? Why would you care if a saloon girl is uncomfortable?" Something shifted in his expression, a flash of understanding mixed with sadness. "Because everyone deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of their station. And because I have seen enough of the world to know that kindness costs nothing but can mean everything." He left then, climbing the stairs to his room, and Delilah stood frozen in the middle of the saloon floor. Martha appeared at her elbow, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "That is a good man, Delilah, a rare one." "It does not matter," Delilah said, her voice flat. "They are moving on tomorrow or the next day. I will never see him again." But she was wrong. The cattle outfit stayed in Sloan for 3 days, waiting out a storm that rolled in from the west and turned the desert into a temporary sea of mud. During those 3 days, Delilah could not escape Gabriel's presence. He ate every meal in the saloon, always at the same corner table, always polite, always careful. He did not stare at her like some of the other men. He did not try to catch her alone or make improper suggestions. He simply existed in her orbit, a constant, steady presence that both terrified and fascinated her. On the second day, she dropped a tray of dishes. The crash echoed through the saloon like gunfire, and Delilah flinched so hard she nearly fell. In an instant, she was back in that cabin outside Las Vegas, Thomas standing over her with fury in his eyes and a bottle in his hand, the sound of breaking glass preceding pain. "Hey, it is all right. They are just dishes." Gabriel's voice cut through the panic, and she realized he had moved to help clean up the mess. But he kept his distance, crouching several feet away as he gathered the larger pieces of broken crockery. He did not reach for her or demand an explanation for her reaction. He simply helped, his presence somehow grounding rather than threatening. "I am so clumsy," Delilah said, her voice shaking as she fought to control her breathing. "We all drop things sometimes. No harm done." He stood, carefully depositing the broken pieces on a nearby table. "Would you like me to fetch a broom?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. He returned moments later with the broom and dustpan, but instead of handing them to her, he swept up the smaller shards himself. It was such a simple act, but it gave her time to compose herself, to rebuild the walls that had momentarily crumbled. "Thank you," she whispered when he finished. "Any time, madam." He paused, then added softly, "My sister used to jump at loud noises too, after her first husband. Well, after. It took her years to feel safe again, but she got there eventually. She is happy now, remarried to a good man who would cut off his own arm before hurting her." He left before Delilah could respond, but his words echoed in her mind for the rest of the day. He knew. Somehow, without her saying a word, Gabriel Ironwood had recognized the signs of her brokenness. The thought should have terrified her, should have sent her running. Instead, she felt a tiny, fragile spark of something she had not experienced in years. Hope. That evening, as she served Gabriel his dinner, he looked up at her with those steady gray eyes and said, "Would you sit with me for a moment, Miss Dawson? I promise I will not keep you long, but I would appreciate the company." Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to maintain the distance that kept her safe. But Martha was watching from the bar with encouraging eyes, and the saloon was full of people, and something about Gabriel made her want to be brave. So she sat, perched on the edge of the chair across from him, ready to flee at the first sign of danger. "I have been thinking about what you asked me the other day," Gabriel began, cutting his steak with careful precision. "About why I would care how you feel. The truth is, I have spent most of my life around broken things. Broken horses, broken land, broken people. And I have learned that just because something is broken does not mean it is worthless. Sometimes the broken things are the most valuable because they have survived what should have destroyed them." Delilah's throat tightened. "People have told me I am too damaged to be worth much of anything. Then those people are fools." Gabriel's voice was firm, but not angry. "I look at you, and I see a woman who gets up every morning and does her work, who treats people with kindness even when the world has not been kind to her. That takes a strength most folks will never understand." "You do not know anything about me," Delilah said, but there was no heat in her words, only exhaustion. "I know enough to see that you have been hurt badly. I know enough to recognize that you are still standing despite it. And I know enough to believe that whoever told you that you were broken was trying to keep you small so they could feel big." He met her eyes across the table. "I have been thinking, Miss Dawson. Our outfit is setting up a winter camp about 20 miles south of here. We will be in the area for months, bringing the cattle through gradually, resting them before the final push. I would like your permission to call on you during that time. Properly, respectfully, just to talk, if nothing else." Delilah's heart hammered against her ribs. "Why would you want to do that?" "Because in 3 days of watching you move through this saloon, I have seen more genuine grace and courage than I have witnessed in most people over a lifetime. Because when you handed me that coffee cup with shaking hands, I saw someone fighting a battle most folks cannot even imagine. And because I think you deserve to know that not every man in this world wants to hurt you." "I cannot," Delilah whispered, the words torn from somewhere deep inside. "I cannot be what you think I am. I am too broken, too damaged. There are pieces of me that will never heal." Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he said, so softly she almost missed it, "Then I will love the pieces. All of them, broken or not, if you will let me try." The words hit Delilah like a physical blow. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. "I need to get back to work." She fled before he could respond, retreating to the kitchen, where she leaned against the wall and tried to remember how to breathe. Martha found her there 10 minutes later, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, honey," Martha said, pulling her into a careful embrace. "What did he say?" "He said he would love the pieces," Delilah sobbed. "He said I was not too broken. But he is wrong, Martha. Thomas was right. I am nothing but damaged goods. Why would someone like Gabriel want someone like me?" "Because he is smart enough to see what you cannot," Martha said firmly. "You are not broken, Delilah. You are a survivor. There is a difference." The cattle outfit left the next morning, the weather having cleared enough for travel. Delilah watched from her window as they organized their departure, Gabriel moving among the horses and men with quiet efficiency. She had not spoken to him again after fleeing the dinner table, had made sure to stay in the kitchen whenever he was in the saloon. It was easier that way, safer. But as the last of the cowboys mounted up and prepared to ride south, Gabriel turned his horse toward the saloon. He sat there for a long moment, his eyes finding her window as if he knew exactly where she would be watching. Then he touched his hat in a salute and rode away, dust rising in his wake. Delilah told herself she was relieved. Life could go back to normal now, back to the comfortable numbness that kept her functioning. She would forget Gabriel Ironwood and his impossible promises, would bury the tiny spark of hope he had ignited before it could grow into something that would hurt when it inevitably died. But 2 weeks later, on a cool November morning, Gabriel rode back into Sloan alone. He tied his horse outside the saloon and walked in just as Delilah was serving breakfast to the handful of locals who called the place home. She froze when she saw him, a plate of eggs trembling in her hands. "Good morning, Miss Dawson," he said, removing his hat. "I was wondering if you might have time for a short walk when you finish your shift. There is something I would like to show you, if you are willing." Martha appeared at Delilah's elbow, taking the plate before it could fall. "She gets off at noon," the older woman said firmly. "And yes, she would love to take a walk with you." Delilah wanted to protest, to refuse, to run back to the safety of her isolation. But Gabriel was looking at her with such patient hope, and Martha was practically pushing her toward the door, and suddenly she was nodding, agreeing to something that terrified her. The morning dragged by with agonizing slowness. Delilah spilled coffee twice, forgot orders, and generally made a mess of her usually impeccable service. Gabriel sat at his corner table, nursing a cup of coffee and reading a battered copy of a newspaper, seemingly content to wait. Every time Delilah glanced his way, she found him calm and steady, an anchor in the storm of her anxiety. At noon, Martha shooed her toward the door. "Go on, honey, I can handle the lunch crowd." And Delilah, "Give him a chance, give yourself a chance." Gabriel stood when she approached, offering his arm in a gesture so old-fashioned it made her throat tight. She did not take it, could not bring herself to touch him, but she walked beside him as they left the saloon and headed toward the edge of town. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "There is a place about half a mile from here," Gabriel said. "A canyon with a spring. It is beautiful this time of year, and I thought you might enjoy seeing it. But we do not have to go if you would rather stay in town, whatever makes you comfortable." The fact that he gave her a choice, that he was willing to abandon his plans based on her comfort, made something loosen in Delilah's chest. "The canyon sounds nice." They walked in silence for a while, Gabriel matching his pace to hers, maintaining a respectful distance. The desert was beautiful in the late autumn light, the harsh edges softened by the angle of the sun. Delilah had lived in Nevada for 3 years, but she had rarely left the confines of Sloan, had been too afraid of the open spaces that reminded her of the isolated cabin where Thomas had held her captive for so long. "Thank you for agreeing to walk with me," Gabriel said eventually. "I know it cannot be easy, trusting a stranger." "Why did you come back?" Delilah asked, the question bursting out before she could stop it. "Your outfit is south of here. You have work to do. Why would you ride all this way just to talk to someone like me?" Gabriel stopped walking, turning to face her with an expression of such genuine confusion that Delilah almost laughed. "Someone like you? Miss Dawson, I rode 20 miles because I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the day we met. Because I have spent the last 2 weeks lying awake at night, thinking about what you said, about people telling you that you were too broken to be worth anything. And it made me angry, angrier than I have been in a long time." "Angry?" Delilah took a step back instinctively. Gabriel raised his hands, palms out, making himself smaller. "Not at you. Never at you. At whoever hurt you so badly that you believe their lies. At a world that breaks people and then blames them for being broken. You asked me why I came back, and the truth is simple. I came back because I think you deserve to know that you are wrong about yourself. You are not too damaged. You are not worthless. You are remarkable, and I would like the chance to prove it to you." "You do not know what you are asking for," Delilah said, tears pricking her eyes. "I am not whole, Gabriel. My husband, he broke things inside me that cannot be fixed. I flinch at loud noises. I cannot stand to be touched. I have nightmares that leave me screaming. What kind of life could I offer someone? What kind of wife could I possibly be?" "I am not asking you to be my wife," Gabriel said gently. "Not now. Maybe not ever if that is not what you want. I am asking for permission to be your friend, to ride into town once a week and take walks with you, to sit in the saloon and talk about nothing important, to show you, slowly and carefully, that not all men are like the one who hurt you." "Why?" The word was a broken whisper. "Why would you do that for me?" Gabriel was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes searching her face. "My sister, the one I mentioned, her name is Grace. When she left her first husband, she came to live with me and my mother in Wyoming. She was so broken, Delilah. She could not eat, could not sleep, jumped at every shadow. I watched her suffer for 2 years, watched her believe that she was worthless, because that is what he had told her every day of their marriage. And then she met Samuel, a rancher from the next county over. He was patient with her, kind, never pushed her for more than she could give. It took 3 years, but eventually, Grace healed enough to believe she deserved happiness. They have been married for 5 years now and have 2 children. Grace laughs again. She lives again. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. When I look at you, I see my sister. I see someone who has survived something terrible and is still fighting to keep going. And I think about how different Grace's life would be if Samuel had not been willing to love her through the healing. I cannot change what happened to you, Delilah. but I can promise that I will never, ever add to your pain. I can promise that I will be patient, that I will respect your boundaries, that I will never ask for more than you can give. And maybe, if I am very lucky, I can help you see yourself the way I see you, as someone worthy of love and respect and all the good things this world has to offer. Delilah was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face. No one had ever spoken to her like this, had ever seen her pain and chosen to stay rather than run. Thomas had taken so much from her, her sense of safety, her trust, her belief in her own worth. But standing here in the desert with Gabriel Ironwood, she felt the first tiny crack in the armor she had built around her heart. "I do not know if I can do this," she whispered. "I do not know if I can let anyone in again." "Then we will go slowly," Gabriel said, "so slowly that you barely notice it happening. And if you ever want me to stop, if this becomes too much, you just say the word and I will disappear. No questions, no judgment. This is about what you need, Delilah. Nothing else matters." They stood there in the desert, two damaged people finding something unexpected in each other's eyes. Finally, Delilah nodded, the gesture small but significant. "I would like to see the canyon now, if the offer is still open." Gabriel's smile was like sunrise. "It would be my honor." The canyon was everything he had promised, a hidden jewel carved into the desert rock. A spring bubbled up from the ground, creating a small pool surrounded by cottonwood trees that blazed gold in the autumn light. It was peaceful in a way Delilah had forgotten existed, a place where the world felt softer, kinder. They sat by the water, careful feet between them, and Gabriel told her stories about the cattle drive, about his life in Wyoming, about his mother, who had raised him and his two sisters alone after his father died in a mining accident. He talked easily, never demanding that she reciprocate, never pushing for information she was not ready to give. And slowly, gradually, Delilah felt herself relaxing, the constant tension that lived in her shoulders easing just a fraction. "Tell me something," Gabriel said after a while. "Something that has nothing to do with pain or the past. Tell me something you love." Delilah thought about it, surprised by how difficult the question was. It had been so long since she had thought about things she loved, about what brought her joy. "Books," she said finally. "I used to love reading before. I would lose myself in stories about places I had never been, people I would never meet. It felt like freedom." "What kind of books?" "Adventure stories, mostly, tales about explorers and distant lands. I know it is silly, a woman like me dreaming about adventure." "It is not silly at all," Gabriel said firmly. "Dreams are never silly, they are what keep us human." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "There is a lending library in a town about 40 miles from here. Next time I come visit, I could bring you some books if you would like. Let me know what sounds interesting, and I will see what I can find." The offer was so simple, so thoughtful, that Delilah found herself smiling for the first time in recent memory. "I would like that very much." They walked back to Sloan as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, and painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. Gabriel left his horse tied outside the saloon and walked Delilah to the door, tipping his hat in farewell. "I will be back next week," he said. "Same time, if that works for you. And Delilah, thank you for today, for taking a chance on me." "Thank you for asking," she replied, meaning it more than he could possibly know. She watched him ride away, and for the first time in 3 years, the weight on her chest felt just a little bit lighter. True to his word, Gabriel returned the following week with a saddlebag full of books. He handed them over with a shy smile, and Delilah spent the next 7 days devouring stories about the Scottish Highlands, the African wilderness, and the Australian outback. When he came back, she talked for an hour straight about the adventures she had read, her eyes bright with excitement, and Gabriel listened as if every word was precious. This became their pattern over the following months. Every week, Gabriel would ride into Sloan and spend his day off with Delilah. Sometimes they walked to the canyon, sometimes they sat in the saloon and talked. Sometimes they simply existed in comfortable silence, Gabriel reading his own book while Delilah worked, their presence a comfort to each other. Slowly, carefully, Delilah began to heal. The nightmares grew less frequent. The flinching subsided. She started wearing her hair down sometimes, the severe bun giving way to softer styles. She laughed more, smiled easier. Martha watched the transformation with tears of joy, and the townspeople of Sloan began to treat Delilah like a person rather than a ghost. But it was not a smooth path. There were setbacks, moments when the past came roaring back with vicious intensity. The first time Gabriel accidentally touched her hand while passing her a book, Delilah jerked away so violently she knocked over a chair. She stood there shaking, waiting for anger, for punishment, for the violence that had always followed when she displeased Thomas. Instead, Gabriel stepped back immediately, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I am so sorry, Delilah. That was careless of me. Are you all right?" It took her several minutes to calm down, to remember where she was, who she was with. Gabriel waited patiently, never moving from his spot, never showing frustration or annoyance at her reaction. When she finally looked at him, she saw only concern and genuine regret. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I know I am being ridiculous. It was just a touch." "You are not being ridiculous," Gabriel said firmly. "Your reactions are valid. They are the result of trauma, not weakness. And I am the one who should apologize. I know better than to reach for you without warning. It will not happen again." "I hate this," Delilah said, the words bursting out in a rush. "I hate that he still has this power over me. He has been dead for 2 years, but he is still controlling my life, still making me afraid." "Healing is not linear," Gabriel said gently. "There will be good days and bad days. The important thing is that you keep trying, keep moving forward. And you are not alone in this, Delilah. I am here for as long as you want me." As winter settled over the Nevada desert, their friendship deepened into something more. Delilah began to look forward to Gabriel's visits with an intensity that both thrilled and terrified her. She caught herself thinking about him at odd moments, wondering what he was doing, if he was safe, if he thought about her the way she thought about him. The feelings growing in her heart were dangerous, she knew. They made her vulnerable in ways she had sworn never to be again. But Gabriel was so patient, so careful with her fragile trust. He never pressured her for more than friendship, never made inappropriate suggestions or demands. When he looked at her, she saw respect and genuine affection, but never the possessive hunger that had characterized Thomas's gaze. Gabriel treated her like a person, like someone whose thoughts and feelings and boundaries mattered. It was during a cold December afternoon, sitting by the spring in the canyon with frost on the ground around them, that Delilah first articulated the truth that had been growing inside her. "I think I am falling in love with you," she said, the words barely audible. "And it terrifies me." Gabriel turned to look at her, his gray eyes wide with surprise, and something that looked suspiciously like joy. "You do not have to be afraid," he said softly. "Not of this, not of me." "I do not know how to do this," Delilah continued, needing to get it all out. "I do not know how to be with someone without being afraid. Thomas, he told me that love meant ownership, that because I was his wife, he could do whatever he wanted to me. He said I owed him my body, my thoughts, my entire existence, and I believed him for so long. Even now, knowing he was wrong, I do not know what love is supposed to look like when it is real and healthy." Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "My mother used to say that real love is wanting someone's happiness more than your own comfort. It is respecting their choices even when you disagree. It is being patient when they are struggling and celebrating when they succeed. Real love does not demand or control or hurt. It gives freely and asks for nothing in return beyond the other person's well-being." "That sounds too good to be true," Delilah said, but there was hope in her voice. "It is not easy," Gabriel admitted. "Loving someone well takes work and intention and constant self-awareness. But, Delilah, I have been falling in love with you since the day you served me coffee with shaking hands, and I saw the strength it took just for you to be in the same room with a stranger. Every week, watching you heal and grow and become more yourself, I fall a little harder. And the thing is, I do not need anything from you. If all you can ever give me is friendship, I will treasure it. If you decide tomorrow that you want me to stop coming around, I will respect that. My love for you is not conditional on what you can give me. It just is." Delilah felt tears streaming down her face, but for once they were not tears of pain. "I want to try," she whispered. "I want to try to love you the way you deserve, but I need you to be patient with me. I need you to understand that there will be times when I cannot bear to be touched, when the fear is too strong, when I need to step back and breathe." "I can do that," Gabriel said immediately. "I will always be patient with you, Delilah. Always." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of their confessions settling around them like snow. Finally, Delilah spoke again, her voice stronger now. "I would like to try something, if it is all right with you." "Anything," Gabriel said. Delilah took a deep breath, gathering her courage. Then, moving with deliberate slowness, she reached out and placed her hand on Gabriel's where it rested on his knee. The touch was feather-light, barely there, but it was intentional and willing and hers to give. Gabriel froze, his eyes locked on their joined hands. He did not move, did not try to take more than she was offering, just accepted this tiny gesture with the gravity it deserved. They sat like that for several minutes, Delilah's hand resting on his, proof that she was healing, that she was choosing this, choosing him. "Thank you," Gabriel said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you for trusting me." "Thank you for being worthy of trust," Delilah replied. As Christmas approached, the entire town of Sloan prepared for the annual celebration. It was a modest affair compared to larger towns, but it brought the community together in a way that reminded everyone they were not alone in the harsh desert landscape. Martha decided to host a dance at the saloon, and she insisted that Delilah attend as a guest rather than working. "You deserve to have fun, honey," Martha said, brooking no argument. "Wear something pretty, dance with that handsome cowboy of yours, and let yourself be young for one evening." The idea of attending a dance terrified Delilah. Crowds made her nervous, and the thought of being on display, of people watching her with Gabriel, made her stomach churn with anxiety. But Gabriel had asked her to save him a dance, his eyes hopeful and warm, and she found herself wanting to try. For him, for herself, for the future they were carefully building together. She wore a blue dress that Martha had helped her make, the fabric soft and pretty in a way her usual severe work clothes never were. She left her hair down, dark waves falling past her shoulders, and when she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked young, almost pretty, no longer the ghost who haunted the saloon. Gabriel arrived as the sun was setting, cleaned up and wearing his best clothes. When he saw Delilah, he stopped in his tracks, his expression one of wonder. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. The saloon was packed with townspeople and cowboys from Gabriel's outfit. Music filled the air, a local man playing fiddle while his wife worked the piano that Martha kept in the corner. People were laughing, dancing, celebrating the season and the simple joy of community. Delilah stayed close to Gabriel's side, his presence a shield against her anxiety. He did not push her to dance immediately, content to stand with her and watch the festivities. He pointed out members of his outfit, telling her stories that made her laugh, his voice a constant, comforting presence in the chaos. "Are you ready?" he asked after a while, gesturing to the dance floor where couples were spinning to a lively tune. Delilah's instinct was to refuse, to stay safe on the sidelines. But she looked at Gabriel, at his patient, hopeful expression, and she thought about how far she had come in the months since they met. She thought about the girl she had been before Thomas, the one who had loved dancing at the rare social gatherings in her childhood town. Maybe that girl was not completely gone. Maybe pieces of her still existed, waiting to be reclaimed. "Yes," she said, and took his offered hand. Gabriel led her onto the floor, his movements slow and telegraphed, so she always knew what was coming next. He held her loosely, his hand barely touching her waist, giving her space to breathe. At first, Delilah was stiff with tension, every nerve screaming at her to flee. But Gabriel was patient, guiding her through the steps with gentle confidence, and gradually she began to relax into the music. They danced 3 songs together, and by the third, Delilah was smiling. She was not graceful, kept missing steps and stumbling over her own feet, but Gabriel did not care. He just kept dancing, his eyes never leaving her face, his expression one of pure joy. When the music finally slowed into a waltz, he pulled her just a fraction closer, still maintaining space, but creating a bubble of intimacy amid the crowd. "You are doing wonderfully," he murmured as they swayed together. "I am stepping all over your feet," Delilah replied, but she was laughing. "I do not even notice. I am too busy being the luckiest man in Nevada." The song ended, and they stepped apart, both breathing hard. Delilah felt lighter than she had in years, as if dancing had shaken loose some of the darkness that clung to her. She looked up at Gabriel, at his kind eyes and gentle smile, and felt a wave of affection so strong it nearly knocked her over. "Thank you," she said, "for this, for everything, for not giving up on me." Never, Gabriel said firmly. I will never give up on you, Delilah. You are too important. They spent the rest of the evening together, sometimes dancing, sometimes just talking in a quiet corner. Martha watched them with undisguised pleasure, and several townspeople approached Delilah to tell her how happy they were to see her smiling. It was overwhelming in the best way, this feeling of being part of a community, of being seen as a person rather than a victim. As the night drew to a close and people began heading home, Gabriel walked Delilah to the stairs that led to her small room above the saloon. They stood there in the dim hallway, neither quite ready to say goodnight. I have been thinking, Gabriel said, his voice low. My outfit will be moving north again in March, back to Wyoming for the summer. I would like you to come with us, with me. Delilah's heart jumped into her throat. Come with you? As what? As whatever you want to be, Gabriel said. As my friend, if that is all you can offer. Or, he paused, then continued with careful deliberation. Or as my wife, if you think you might be ready for that. I know it is fast, and I know you have every reason to be cautious about marriage after what you went through. But, Delilah, I love you. I want to spend my life proving to you that love can be good and safe and joyful. I want to wake up every morning with you beside me and fall asleep every night counting my blessings that you chose to trust me. But only if that is what you want too. No pressure, no expectations. Just think about it, please. Delilah stared at him, her mind reeling. Marriage. The word itself was loaded with trauma, with memories of pain and degradation and helplessness. She had sworn she would never marry again, never put herself under any man's control. But Gabriel was not asking for control. He was offering partnership, companionship, love freely given. He was offering everything Thomas had denied her: respect, patience, genuine affection. I need time, she said finally. To think, to be sure. This is not something I can decide lightly. Of course, Gabriel said immediately. Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere until March, and even then, the offer stands. A year from now, 5 years from now, if you decide you want this, I will still be here. He tipped his hat to her and left, and Delilah climbed the stairs to her room with her mind spinning. She lay awake most of the night, thinking about Gabriel's proposal, about the life he was offering, about the risk and the reward. The next morning, Martha found her staring out the window at the desert landscape. He asked you to marry him, the older woman said. It was not a question. He asked me to go north with him in March, as his wife, if I want to be. And what do you want, honey? Delilah was quiet for a long moment. I want to say yes. I want it so badly it scares me. But I am afraid, Martha. What if I cannot be a good wife? What if the damage is too deep? What if I hurt him by not being able to give him everything a husband deserves? Listen to me, Martha said firmly, taking Delilah's hands in hers. That man does not want everything. He wants you, exactly as you are, broken pieces and all. And from what I have seen over the past months, you two are good together. He makes you happy. He makes you feel safe. That is what marriage should be built on, not some outdated idea of wifely duty. What if I fail? Delilah whispered. What if you succeed? Martha countered. What if you take this chance and discover that you are capable of more than you ever imagined? Honey, you have spent 3 years surviving. Is not it time you started living? The words resonated deep in Delilah's soul. She thought about the past months with Gabriel, about the slow, careful healing that had taken place. She thought about the woman she had been before Thomas and the woman she was becoming with Gabriel's help. She thought about the future, about the possibility of happiness, of love, of a life not defined by fear. That afternoon, when Gabriel arrived for his weekly visit, Delilah met him at the door. She did not say anything, just took his hand and led him to their canyon. They sat by the spring, and Delilah gathered every ounce of courage she possessed. I want to say yes, she told him. I want to marry you and go north and build a life together. But I need you to understand what you are getting into. I am going to have bad days, Gabriel. Days when I cannot bear to be touched, when the nightmares are too strong, when I am not sure I can keep going. I am going to need patience and understanding and probably more space than most wives would require. I might never be completely whole. Are you truly willing to accept that? Gabriel took her hand carefully, telegraphing his movements so she could pull away if needed. Delilah, I have told you before, I will love the pieces, all of them, always. I am not asking you to be perfect. I am asking you to be yourself, whatever that looks like on any given day. On your bad days, I will hold space for you. On your good days, I will celebrate with you. And every single day, I will be grateful that you chose me." "Then yes," Delilah said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you. I will go north with you. I will try to build the kind of life I never thought I could have." Gabriel pulled her into a careful embrace, and for the first time, Delilah did not flinch away. She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. This was what safety felt like, she realized. This was what love was supposed to be. They were married in February, a small ceremony at the Sloane Church, with Martha and the local preacher as witnesses. Delilah wore a simple white dress, and Gabriel stood beside her with tears in his eyes, promising to love and cherish her for all the days of their lives. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Gabriel kissed her forehead gently, respecting the boundaries they had discussed about physical intimacy. They would move at her pace, he had promised, and he meant it. The wedding night was difficult. Despite Gabriel's kindness and patience, Delilah found herself paralyzed with fear, memories of Thomas overwhelming her. Gabriel held her while she cried, never once making her feel guilty or inadequate. He told her stories until she calmed, then tucked her into bed and settled himself in a chair by the window. "What are you doing?" Delilah asked, confused. "Giving you space," Gabriel said simply. "You need to feel safe, and right now, safe means not having me in the bed with you. That is fine, Delilah. We have all the time in the world. You are truly willing to spend your wedding night in a chair? I would spend 1,000 wedding nights in a chair if it meant you felt secure," Gabriel replied. "This is not about what I want. It is about what you need." Delilah cried herself to sleep that night, but they were tears of gratitude rather than pain. She had married a good man, a truly good man, and maybe, just maybe, she could build a life worth living. In March, they packed up Delilah's meager belongings and joined the cattle outfit for the journey north. The trail was hard, the days long and exhausting, but Delilah found herself exhilarated rather than overwhelmed. She rode beside Gabriel, the landscape changing around them as they left Nevada behind and pushed into Utah territory. At night, they made camp under vast starry skies, and Gabriel would point out constellations while Delilah marveled at the beauty of the world she had hidden from for so long. The other cowboys treated her with respect, no doubt warned by Gabriel to mind their manners. A few of the younger men were clearly curious about the boss's new wife, but they kept their distance and their questions to themselves. Gradually, Delilah began to relax around them, to participate in camp conversations, to laugh at their jokes and stories. It was during this journey that Delilah and Gabriel's physical relationship began to evolve. One night, lying in their bedroll under the stars, Delilah reached for Gabriel's hand. It was a small gesture, one they had done many times before, but it felt different now. Intentional. She laced her fingers through his and held on. "I want to try," she whispered, "to be a real wife to you. I do not know if I can, but I want to try." "There is no pressure," Gabriel said immediately. "I meant what I said, Delilah. I am happy with whatever you can give me. I know, but I want this. I want you. I am afraid." Gabriel rolled onto his side, facing her in the darkness. "We will go slowly. You will be in control the entire time. If anything feels wrong, if you need to stop, you just say the word and we stop. No questions, no hurt feelings. This is about you feeling safe and loved, nothing else." They made love that night with exquisite slowness, Gabriel checking in with her constantly, making sure she was all right, that she wanted to continue. It was not perfect. Delilah cried twice, memories intruding at inopportune moments. But Gabriel was patient, holding her through the difficult parts, never pushing for more than she could give. And in the end, lying in his arms with tears drying on her cheeks, Delilah felt something shift inside her. This was what intimacy was supposed to be, she realized. A gift given freely between two people who cared for each other, not a weapon used to control and hurt. "Thank you," she whispered against Gabriel's chest. "For what?" he murmured, his hand stroking her hair gently. "For loving me well, for being patient, for showing me that I am not too broken for this." "You were never too broken," Gabriel said firmly. "You were hurt, and that is different. But you are healing, Delilah. Every day I watch you become more yourself. It is the most beautiful thing I have ever witnessed." They reached Wyoming in May, the landscape green and lush after the desert harshness of Nevada. Gabriel's ranch was modest, a small cabin and barn set in a valley with mountains rising in the distance. His mother, Ruth, lived in a larger house nearby, with Gabriel's younger sister, Mary. They welcomed Delilah with open arms, asking no questions about her past, only expressing joy that Gabriel had found happiness. Ruth was a force of nature, a woman who had raised 3 children alone and managed a ranch through sheer determination and grit. She took one look at Delilah and seemed to understand everything without being told. She made space for her, never pushing for intimacy, but making it clear that Delilah was family now, that she had a place here. Gabriel's sister Grace came to visit in June, bringing her husband Samuel and their 2 children. Delilah was nervous about meeting the woman Gabriel had mentioned, the one whose story so closely mirrored her own. But Grace was warm and kind, with knowing eyes that saw too much. One afternoon, while the men were working with the cattle and the children were playing in the yard, Grace pulled Delilah aside. "Gabriel told me a little about your past," she said gently. "I hope you do not mind. He wanted me to know so I could be sensitive." "I do not mind," Delilah said, though her shoulders tensed instinctively. "I want you to know that it gets easier," Grace continued. "The fear, the nightmares, the feeling that you are broken beyond repair. It fades, Delilah. Not completely, maybe never completely, but enough that you can live without it consuming you. I am proof of that. 10 years ago, I was where you are now. And now, look at me. I am happy, truly, deeply happy. And you will be too." "How did you do it?" Delilah asked. "How did you learn to trust again?" "Time, therapy from a good doctor in Cheyenne, and a man who refused to give up on me." Grace smiled. "Gabriel learned how to be a good husband by watching Samuel with me. He knows what you need because he saw what I needed. You are in good hands, Delilah, better than you probably realize." The 2 women became fast friends, Grace offering a kind of understanding that only someone who had walked the same dark path could provide. She shared her own struggles and triumphs, her setbacks and victories, and slowly Delilah began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could heal completely. The summer passed in a blur of work and discovery. Delilah learned to help with the ranch, discovering a talent for working with horses that surprised everyone, including herself. She started a garden behind the cabin, planting vegetables and flowers, creating beauty in the harsh Wyoming landscape. She read books in the evenings while Gabriel worked on ranch accounts, the 2 of them existing in comfortable companionship that felt like home. Their physical relationship continued to evolve, intimacy becoming easier as Delilah's trust grew. There were still difficult moments, times when the past intruded and she had to step back. But Gabriel never made her feel guilty or inadequate. He just adjusted, finding new ways to show his love that did not trigger her trauma. In October, Delilah realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with a complicated mix of joy and terror. She remembered Thomas's violence, the way he had raged at her for not giving him children, though in retrospect, she was grateful that particular tie had never bound her to him. But carrying Gabriel's child felt different. This baby would be created from love, not violence. This baby would be wanted. She told Gabriel one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. He was quiet for a long moment, then pulled her into his arms and held her while he cried. "We are going to be parents," he whispered. "We are going to have a family." "Are you happy?" Delilah asked, needing to hear it. "I am terrified and overjoyed and more grateful than I can possibly express," Gabriel said. "You have given me so much, Delilah, more than I ever dreamed possible." "You saved me," she replied simply. "You looked at my broken pieces and decided they were worth loving. You gave me my life back." The pregnancy was difficult, Delilah's body struggling with the demands of carrying a child. She was sick for months, exhausted and miserable. Gabriel hovered, driving her crazy with his constant concern, but she loved him for it. Ruth moved into the cabin to help, her competent presence a comfort as Delilah navigated the strange experience of growing a human being. Their son was born in May of 1880, a healthy, screaming infant with Gabriel's gray eyes and Delilah's dark hair. They named him James, after Gabriel's father, and Thomas was never mentioned, that name consigned to the past where it belonged. Delilah fell in love with motherhood in a way that surprised her. She had worried that her trauma would make her inadequate, that she would be too damaged to care for a child properly. But holding James, nursing him, watching him grow and change, she felt something unlock inside her. This was purpose. This was joy. This was life beyond survival. Gabriel was a devoted father, waking for nighttime feedings, changing diapers, spending hours walking the floor with a fussy baby so Delilah could sleep. He approached fatherhood with the same patient intentionality he brought to everything, determined to be the kind of father his own had been before death cut that relationship short. As James grew from infant to toddler, the Ironwood Ranch prospered. Gabriel's reputation as a fair dealer and skilled cattleman spread, and the operation expanded. They built a larger house to accommodate their growing family, though Delilah insisted on keeping the cabin as a guest house. It held too many good memories, she said. It was where they had built their life together, where she had learned to trust again. Grace and Samuel visited often, their children playing with James in the Wyoming sunshine. Delilah watched these gatherings with profound gratitude, amazed at how far she had come from the broken woman Gabriel had met in that Nevada saloon. She had friends now, family, a community that knew her story and loved her anyway. When James was 2, Delilah gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. She was a calm, watchful baby, so different from her boisterous brother. Delilah would hold her and think about all the things she wanted for this little girl: a life free from fear, the knowledge of her own worth, the certainty that love did not have to hurt. It was on a cool autumn evening, with both children asleep and the house quiet, that Delilah finally told Gabriel the full story of her marriage to Thomas. She had shared pieces over the years, fragments of the horror she had endured. But she had never laid it all out, every terrible detail, every moment of degradation and pain. Gabriel listened without interruption, his face growing pale but his presence steady. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I wish I could have protected you from that. I wish I could go back in time and save you sooner." "You saved me exactly when I needed saving," Delilah said. "If we had met earlier, I would not have been ready. I needed to survive Thomas, to escape him, to spend those years in Sloan, becoming strong enough to accept help. Everything happened exactly as it was supposed to." "I have something I want to tell you," Gabriel said. "Something I have been thinking about for a long time." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "That first day, when I walked into the saloon in Sloan, I saw you serving tables and I was struck by how scared you looked. And I thought about Grace, about how she had looked in those first years after leaving her husband. I told myself I would be kind to you, the way Samuel had been kind to Grace. That was all I intended, just basic human decency." "What changed?" Delilah asked. "You did. The more time I spent with you, the more I saw your strength, your courage, your determination to keep going, despite everything you had endured. I fell in love with your spirit, Delilah, with the core of who you are beneath the trauma, and I realized that loving you was not about fixing you or saving you. It was about bearing witness to your healing, about being a steady presence while you did the hard work of putting yourself back together." "You did more than bear witness," Delilah said. "You showed me what love was supposed to look like. You gave me a reason to believe I could be whole again." "You were always whole," Gabriel said firmly. "Just wounded. There is a difference." Delilah kissed him then, a gesture that still sometimes required courage but grew easier every day. "I love you, Gabriel Ironwood. Thank you for loving my pieces until I could love them too." The years passed with the steady rhythm of ranch life. James grew into a bright, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, learning the business of cattle and horses. Rose was quieter, preferring books and drawing to outdoor adventures, and Delilah saw so much of herself in her daughter that it made her heart ache. When James was 7 and Rose 5, Delilah gave birth to twin boys, Daniel and Matthew. The pregnancy had been a surprise, the twins even more so. The house was chaos for the next several years, but it was joyful chaos, the kind that came from a family full of love and laughter. Delilah never forgot where she had come from. The nightmares still came occasionally, though less frequently as the years passed. Sometimes loud noises made her jump. Sometimes she needed space, time alone to process difficult emotions. But Gabriel never wavered in his support, never made her feel weak for struggling with the echoes of her past. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Gabriel took Delilah back to Nevada. They left the children with Ruth and made the long journey south, retracing the path they had taken together all those years ago. Sloan had grown some, the railroad finally reaching the small town and bringing commerce and new residents. But the saloon was still there, and Martha was still running it, though she was older now, her hair more gray than brown. The reunion was tearful and joyous. Martha fussed over them, demanded to see pictures of the children, marveled at how happy and healthy Delilah looked. That evening, after the dinner rush died down, the three of them sat in the same corner where Gabriel had first asked permission to court Delilah. "I knew he was special the moment I saw him," Martha said, smiling at Gabriel. "The way he looked at you, like you were precious. I prayed so hard that you would give him a chance." "I am glad I did," Delilah said, taking Gabriel's hand. "He gave me my life back." "You gave yourself your life back," Gabriel corrected gently. "I just provided a safe space for you to heal. You did all the hard work, Delilah." They visited the canyon the next day, the spring still bubbling up from the ground, the cottonwoods golden in the autumn light. It looked exactly as Delilah remembered, a place frozen in time. They sat by the water, and Delilah thought about the broken woman who had sat here 10 years ago, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. "What are you thinking?" Gabriel asked. "I am thinking about how far I have come, about the life we have built together, about how grateful I am that you walked into that saloon and saw something in me worth saving." "Worth loving," Gabriel corrected, "not saving. You were never a project or a mission. You were always just someone I loved." "I spent so long believing I was too broken to deserve love," Delilah said. "Thomas convinced me that I was worthless, that no one would ever want me. And then you came along and said you would love the pieces. You said it so simply, like it was obvious, like there was never any question. Do you know how much that meant to me?" "I meant every word," Gabriel said, "then and now and always. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Delilah. You and our children, the life we have built. I would not change a single moment." They made love that night in the hotel where they were staying, their intimacy deeper and richer than it had been in those early, hesitant days. Delilah marveled at how far she had come, how she could now give and receive pleasure without fear, without the ghosts of the past intruding. Gabriel had been so patient, so willing to meet her where she was, and now they could simply be together, two people who loved each other completely. As they prepared to leave Sloan and return to Wyoming, Martha pulled Delilah aside. "I want you to know how proud I am of you," the older woman said, tears in her eyes. "When you first came to work for me, you were a ghost, barely there, just going through the motions of living. And now look at you. You are radiant, Delilah. You are everything I hoped you could be." "Thank you for giving me a safe place to land," Delilah said, embracing her. "Thank you for seeing me as a person, not a victim. I would not have survived without you." "You are stronger than you know," Martha said. "You always were. You just needed the right people to remind you." The journey back to Wyoming took 2 weeks, and they used the time to talk about their future. The children were growing, the ranch was thriving, and life was good. Gabriel talked about expanding the operation, maybe buying the neighboring property. Delilah talked about wanting to start a lending library in their community, a way to share her love of books with others. They dreamed together, making plans for the years ahead. It was a luxury Delilah never took for granted, this ability to look forward rather than constantly glancing over her shoulder in fear. Gabriel had given her that, had shown her that the future could be something to anticipate rather than dread. The children grew and thrived. James developed his father's quiet competence with animals and land. Rose discovered a talent for painting, her artwork decorating every wall of the house. The twins were wild and adventurous, constantly getting into mischief, but full of joy and laughter. Delilah watched them play and thought about the legacy she was creating, a family built on love and respect rather than fear and control. When James turned 16, he began courting a girl from a neighboring ranch. Watching her son navigate young love, Delilah felt both pride and protectiveness. She pulled him aside one evening and spoke to him seriously about respect, about consent, about treating his partner as an equal rather than a possession. "I know, Ma," James said, looking uncomfortable but attentive. "Pa has talked to me about this too, about how to be a good man, how to treat women with respect. He told me about your first husband, about how badly he treated you. I promise I will never be that kind of man." Delilah hugged him fiercely, grateful beyond words that her son had Gabriel as a role model. The cycle of violence ended here, with this generation because Gabriel had shown their children what healthy love looked like. Rose, at 14, announced that she wanted to go to art school in Denver. It was a bold dream for a ranch girl, but Delilah and Gabriel supported it fully. They had always encouraged their children to pursue their passions, to build lives that brought them joy. If Rose wanted to be an artist, they would find a way to make it happen. The twins at 12 were still too young to know what they wanted from life. They were content to run wild on the ranch, learning from their father, causing chaos wherever they went. Delilah looked at them and saw the freedom she had been denied in her own childhood, the security of knowing they were loved and valued exactly as they were. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Gabriel surprised Delilah with a trip to San Francisco. It was an extravagant gesture, one they could barely afford, but Gabriel insisted. "You have spent your entire adult life taking care of others," he said, "first surviving Thomas, then working at the saloon, then raising our children. You deserve to see something beautiful, to have an adventure." San Francisco was overwhelming and exciting in equal measure. They stayed in a real hotel, ate at restaurants, visited museums and theaters. Delilah felt like the heroine in one of her beloved adventure novels, experiencing a world far beyond the Wyoming ranch that had become her home. One evening, standing on a bluff overlooking the ocean, Gabriel turned to her with serious eyes. "I have been thinking about something," he said. "About that day in Sloan, when I told you I would love your pieces. I want you to know that I do not see you as broken anymore. I have not for years. You are whole, Delilah. Beautifully, wonderfully whole. And I am so grateful that you chose to share your life with me." Delilah thought about his words, about the journey she had taken from that terrified woman in a Nevada saloon to the confident mother and wife she had become. He was right. She was not broken anymore. The scars remained, probably always would, but they were part of her story rather than the entirety of it. "I could not have become whole without you," she said. "You showed me what I was capable of, what I deserved. You loved me when I could not love myself, and that made all the difference." "We saved each other," Gabriel said simply. "I was so lost before I met you, going through the motions of living without any real purpose. You gave me something to live for, a reason to be better. Our life together has been the greatest gift I could have imagined." They returned to Wyoming, renewed and reconnected, ready to face whatever the future held. The ranch continued to prosper, their children continued to grow, and life unfolded with the steady rhythm of seasons passing. When Delilah was 42, Martha passed away peacefully in her sleep. The news hit Delilah hard, this woman who had been a lifeline during her darkest days. Gabriel took her back to Sloan for the funeral, and Delilah stood in the small cemetery feeling grateful for the brief time Martha had been part of her life. "She would be so proud of you," Gabriel said as they stood before the fresh grave, "of the woman you have become, the life you have built." "I wish I could tell her one more time how much she meant to me," Delilah said, tears streaming down her face. "She knew," Gabriel assured her. "She saw it every time she looked at you. You were her success story, Delilah. Her proof that love and patience could heal even the deepest wounds." As the years continued to pass, Delilah and Gabriel grew old together, with grace and contentment. James took over the ranch operation, his young wife helping to manage the growing enterprise. Rose returned from art school in Denver with a degree and a portfolio, setting up a studio in town where she taught and created. The twins eventually settled on nearby properties, both of them starting families of their own. Delilah became a grandmother, then a great-grandmother, watching her family expand in ways she never could have imagined during those dark years with Thomas. Every child born into the Ironwood family carried the legacy of love and respect that she and Gabriel had built, a foundation that would last for generations. On a warm summer evening in 1910, 58-year-old Delilah sat on the porch of the house she and Gabriel had built together. Gabriel, now 64, sat beside her in his rocking chair, their hands clasped together as they watched the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and crimson. "What are you thinking about?" Gabriel asked, his voice rougher with age but still carrying that gentle tone she loved. "I am thinking about how different my life could have been. If you had not walked into that saloon, if I had not taken a chance on trusting you, if I had stayed locked in fear and isolation, I would have missed all of this. Our children, our grandchildren, the life we have built together. It is almost too much to comprehend." "I think about that too sometimes," Gabriel admitted. about how close I came to never knowing you, to living my whole life without experiencing this depth of love and partnership. But fate brought us together, and I will be grateful for that every day until I die. Do you remember what you said to me that night in the saloon, when I told you I was too broken to be loved? I said I would love the pieces, Gabriel replied immediately. How could I forget? It was the moment everything changed. You kept that promise, Delilah said, her voice thick with emotion. Every single day for 32 years, you have loved all of me, the strong parts and the weak parts, the healed parts and the parts that still hurt sometimes. You never gave up on me, never made me feel like my struggles were a burden. You just loved me. It was the easiest promise I ever made, Gabriel said, because loving you has been the greatest joy of my life. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, surrounded by the sounds of their family preparing dinner inside the house. Multiple generations under one roof for the weekly family gathering that had become tradition. The laughter of children, the murmur of adult conversation, the clatter of dishes being set out. It was the sound of life, of love, of a legacy built on the foundation of two broken people who had chosen to heal together. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Delilah thought about the young woman she had been, the one who had believed she was too damaged for happiness. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that healing was possible, that love existed without pain, that broken pieces could be treasured rather than discarded. But she could not go back. All she could do was move forward, cherishing every moment of the beautiful life she and Gabriel had created. And as she sat there in the gathering darkness, Gabriel's hand warm in hers, Delilah knew with absolute certainty that she had found what she had been searching for all along, a love that saw her completely and chose to stay. Their story was not one of a man saving a broken woman. It was the story of two people who found each other in the wilderness of their pain and decided to build something beautiful together. It was the story of patience and persistence, of small victories and hard-won trust. It was the story of a cowboy who looked at a woman's broken pieces and said they were worth loving, and a woman who found the courage to believe him. And in the end, it was the story of a love that healed, that endured, that proved beyond any doubt that no one is ever too broken to be loved. They just need to find the right person to love them. Gabriel and Delilah Ironwood lived the rest of their days in that Wyoming valley, surrounded by family and filled with contentment. When Gabriel passed away peacefully at 78, Delilah held his hand and thanked him one final time for seeing her worth when she could not see it herself. She lived another 5 years after his death, spending her time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about the cowboy who had loved her broken pieces and made her whole. And when Delilah finally closed her eyes for the last time at 83, she died knowing that she had been deeply, truly, completely loved. She died knowing that her life had mattered, that the family she and Gabriel had built would carry forward the legacy of their love. She died knowing that the broken woman who had stood in that Nevada saloon so many years ago had healed, had thrived, had lived a life of meaning and joy. The Ironwood family continues to this day, each generation carrying forward the story of Gabriel and Delilah, the cowboy and the woman who were told she was too broken to be loved. Their story is a reminder that love, real love, does not demand perfection. It accepts, it nurtures, it waits. It sees the broken places and treasures them as part of the whole. It says, without hesitation or qualification, you are enough exactly as you are. And sometimes, if we are very lucky, that is enough to heal even the deepest wounds.